So, I guess I'll get started with how I even got here, how I even got to this point of um, having to undergo both chemo and radiation therapy. Um, Back when I was visiting the U.S. In August of 2019, I was staying with some family members. At first, I stayed with some over on the West Coast, and then I stayed with some over here in the Midwest. And when I was visiting my father, it came about that I had a large lump on my neck, which you can kind of see here, kind of the bump that it is today. The bump that it was then was actually, it's on my Facebook page actually, but it was much a bit larger than this. It went, yeah, it was pretty big. I'd have to say the size of a little bit between a softball and a baseball. That's my guess on how big it was. And it really didn't start developing, not that I noticed, until I left my father's place to go visit my brother on the other side of the state. While we were staying with him, it was during the night 2 or 3 times that I woke up because my pillow was covered in sweat. This gave me flashbacks of the time I talked to my father about his cancer that he had, which I do believe was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And based off of that, when I went to him and asked him about some of the symptoms I was seeing and stuff like that, he said that it sounded like it could be similar, but I believe he said he didn't think it was the same thing at that time. And so I quickly tried to get some traveler's insurance and I ended up calling the travel insurance agency, and I talked to a man. I really wish I would have wrote down his name or whatever, but for some reason I think I've said this before, that I think his name was Anthony or Tony or Anthony, or that's what I think, but it doesn't matter here nor there. Talked to him and I asked him about what is deemed a pre-existing condition, because that seemed to be the only real stickler to the whole getting traveler's insurance. And he said, well, have you been to see a doctor about it? And I was like, nope. He's like, well, then it's not a pre-existing condition. You don't know what it is right now, so yeah. And I was like, okay, thank you. So that night, which was late at night, so again, as much as I remember his actual name, I remember what time I actually filled out all the form and submitted it and stuff like that. I remember getting the email in the morning, sometime in the morning, and I then proceeded to go to the walk-in clinic there in the town that my dad lived in. And when I went there, I had to pay $96 up front, if I remember correctly, $96 up front. And that was before I could even see anybody, which kind of blew me away because I was so used to the Japanese healthcare system and stuff like that. Is just, completely different. Completely and utterly different. And so eventually I was able to see a doctor. The doctor touched my neck, and I think I spent a total of 2 to 3 minutes in that whole entire room. And I would get a bill for either $400 or $600 for that visit, on top of the $96 I paid just to be at the walk-in clinic. And what she said after that 2 or 3 minutes, well, during that 2 or 3 minutes actually, she said, I'm going to send you to the ER because we don't have the machines available here for me to do anything with this. So I guess she was referencing CT scan and or doing blood work, which is after I would go to the ER, assuming I had traveler's insurance, I didn't even really hesitate. I thought everything was hunky-dory in that aspect. And they did, or I can't remember how long I stayed there. I want to say it was almost 4 hours. I'd have to ask my wife to be 100%. But after that 4 hours was up, I had blood work done. I had a CT scan done. It came back as the doctor thought for sure it was not cancerous, which was my fear from the beginning. And he said that it was likely a few different things. It could be a few different things, but it was likely a viral or a bacterial infection. And so when that came back, he also said that I should go the following day to see an ENT. And I guess there's only one real ENT within that town. And so I went to that ENT the very next day. And when I got there, I found out that I wasn't going to actually meet the ENT that's supposed to be working. I met a woman who was more or less his understudy, and she performed what they call a fine needle aspiration biopsy on my neck on that site, and which I was already told before that it was a series of swollen lymph nodes that had been together. And what happened with that is she sent it off to a different city for evaluation, and I let her know that I was going to be returning to Japan very soon, and she told me, okay, well, we'll get your results and we'll email you the stuff that we have, and we'll let you know what we find, so you can tell the ENT there in Japan. So I followed up with the ENT there in Japan, and he asked me what they did for me when I was in the U.S. And I told him that what they had done at the emergency room was they performed the CT scan and did the blood work, and then in the end they ended up prescribing me an antibiotic and another drug, which, if anyone's really curious as to what they were exactly, I can go and look them up. I have all that documentation still. But when I got to Japan and I talked to that ENT there, he said to continue with it, and he wanted me to do one more round afterwards. And during that session, he told me that what would happen is it would go away within 2 or 3 weeks completely. It would take a little while, but it would go away completely. And so that's what I did. I finished out the meds, like he said, waited the 3 weeks, like he said, and I noticed it didn't get any smaller than the size of a green pea. And at that point, I didn't really think much of it, because I had also gotten an email back from the ENT understudy in the U.S. telling me that there was nothing found. So it wasn't cancerous or anything like that. And so I just kind of wrote it off as like, it's going to go away eventually. So in the November-ish time frame, I want to say middle to later November, I started developing this weird smell in my nose. And it was only in the one side of my nose, the right side, actually. And I had a weird taste in my mouth, like, to where whenever I ate food, I couldn't really taste the food. It was just that constant smell and lingering taste. So it went away after a while, so of course I didn't think much of it. And then it came back. And then it went away. And then it came back. So finally, I had told my wife about it. She had cooked a meal for me, which I enjoyed, if I remember correctly. It was one of those that I enjoyed, and so I was kind of like not happy that I wasn't able to enjoy the taste of it and everything to the fullest, like I should. And then I went to the ENT there in Japan again and asked him if there was anything going on, and he noticed that a little bit of the lump had come back. It wasn't this size. It was like much smaller. He would eventually measure it as 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters whenever I went to go visit him. Sorry. So what happened with that is he prescribed me another round of the antibiotics we had before. So I finished them out, and it was during that time that, of course, the bump still seemed to respond to the antibiotics, but not as well as it did the first time because it didn't go all the way back down that much. And so when I went back after I'd finished those antibiotics, I had forgot to tell him that it had never actually gone away. So his impression was it was a reoccurring when it actually was not. And so when he found out that bit of information, he decided to do a ultrasound. He called it an ultrasonic, but his English was pretty good, to be fair. He was very easily understandable and stuff. But anyway, he performed an ultrasound on the site and came to the conclusion that it wasn't cancerous either, based off of what he saw from the ultrasound. He wasn't saying that was an official diagnosis, but he said that's what he believed it not to be. It was cancer because of the site being a filled-in whitish color. He said if it had been cancer, it actually would have been black. And so, of course, I got the picture of that too. Maybe I'll put it up here somewhere. And so what he suggested was that I go to the Japanese Red Cross hospital there in the town that we lived in and see if they could actually just remove it from my neck. And so I at that time, since I remembered it having responded to the antibiotics before, I asked him what did he think about doing one more round of antibiotics. Yeah, self-diagnosing myself, I know. But I don't know, for some reason I just felt like that might be the thing to do. That might do the trick. And so I said, okay, yeah, we can try one more round, but I still think in the end we're going to be sending you to the Japanese Red Cross hospital. And so, sure enough, after that round of antibiotics, came back to him, and he said that he had been thinking about it, and he was like, it might be a cyst that actually has attached onto your esophagus, so there might be like an attachment to it that's creating that smell, that taste, things like that. And so he said that he's going to refer me to the Red Cross hospital, and that they're just probably going to trim it off of my esophagus and then observe it or something. So we took his advice, went to the Red Cross hospital, and of course by this time it's early February. And when we got there, they did another fine needle aspiration, and the person that performed it was also, it seemed like she was an understudy too. As the story goes on, she doesn't really enter into the story again because, yes, because we had to wait a week for the results. Both the results of a blood test, which I had to do, and she performed the second fine needle aspiration, FNA. And so when I came back for the results, because I was thinking to myself, and she's just going to find that it's whatever, and then she's going to trim it off. They're going to have to do a surgery on it. I was kind of stunned, actually. I went there by myself. This time it wasn't with my wife. And I walked into the office there or the meeting room there at the Red Cross Hospital. And the doctor's opening line was, "You should go back to your country." And of course I didn't know how to respond to that, because I didn't know what the heck was going on. He would later start to tell me that I had, more or less he said I had cancer, and that the site that they did the FNA on was metastatic, which meant that it was more or less the child of the mother of the actual site. So, and then of course I would read that it's just like a broken off piece of the original site that got into the lymph node and started doing its thing there. And so after he got done with his whole thing, I mentioned that I had a wife and I had a child there in Japan, and just packing up and going back to my country wasn't going to be so easy. I then proceeded to go get my wife, brought her back. She had at least an understanding of what was going on to a degree, based off of her past experiences and stuff like that. When she asked the questions, she got decent answers that led us to continue with like finding out exactly what it was. And so he requested permission to do what they called a fibroscope. This was one where they shove it in your nose so that they can get a good view of the back of your throat, as opposed to going straight in and bonking up against the back of your throat, hitting your tonsils and stuff like that. So what they did is they went in and they looked at the back of my throat, they looked at the back of my tongue, and they found a site that they believed to be cancerous on the back of my tongue. So based on the pictures that he took with that first initial fibroscope, he decided to go in with a much thicker fibroscope that was for pulling actual tissue from the site. And so when he went in with the second one, he of course had to numb up everything and stuff like that, and then go in with that big one. Yeah, I did bleed in my nostril for a few days after, but he said that was regular. People have that happen. So he got, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 different pieces to sample the site, and then I ended up vomiting on on him and the nurse. And what happened after that was I saw them putting the stuff into their little slide thing that they were trying to keep it on, more or less like a petri dish kind of thing. And I specifically told him, I was like, you know, if you guys didn't get enough, I can tough it out. Go ahead and do it again so that you guys can get enough. And so when I asked him, well, or told him about that, he was like, no. He seemed pretty confident. He's like, we got enough to get our tests run on it and stuff, and then he told us to come back in a week again. After we returned after that week, so the past week, the past week I had been diagnosed was the 25th of February, Japan time. Won't forget that day. That was the 25th. So the following week was obviously pushing into March time frame. And so when we went in for our meeting with him then, he told us that the results of the tissue that he was trying to biopsy, more or less, to make sure that that was the site, he said it came back not conclusive. And so with that said, he said he knew what he saw, and that's the kind of doctor he is. He's a cancer doctor, more specific, an ENT cancer doctor, so head and neck, I guess, not really ENT. Anyway, he knew what he saw, and he wanted to go through with doing a full range of tests if I was going to decide to stay in Japan to receive my treatment. I forgot to say that before that, he reiterated again, you should go back to your country. And said it to my wife too, and she was not happy about him saying that. We would eventually follow up with our friends, whether it was my basketball teammates, our actual friends, our spiritual family there that we had in Japan. Everybody was like, why is he saying this? Why is he trying to get you guys to go home? We don't understand. We can get you to a different hospital. We can get you in with a different doctor, get a second opinion about this kind of thing. And so as I went through the round of tests, it was more or less about a week and a half worth of tests. They did all kinds of stuff. They did a CT scan, a PET CT scan, an MRI, an ECG, a blow test, like where you've got to blow and test how hard you can breathe out. I did, what else? Oh, they did an endoscopy. There we go. They did that one. And yeah, they did some more blood testing and stuff. So what they did is they made us wait another week after all that stuff would come back, before we could get all of the results of all the tests together. And so that would end up being the 17th of March that we got the word on what all the results were, like the exact stage, the exact type, things like that. But we acted as if everything was still going to go forward with doing the treatments and such there in Japan. So when we got the results of all of the tests and things like that, it came back that it was a Stage II Oropharyngeal cancer. Yeah, so the base was the back of my tongue. It had metastasized into not only one, but two lymph nodes, one on either side of my neck. So the one that's big and puffy obviously had more of an effect there, but so I guess according to the scans, I believe it was the PET CT scan, maybe. There's one over here on this side too. It's really small. It's really rinky-dink, but they said it's there. And so the good news, silver lining to all the tests coming back was that it had not spread to any other part of my body whatsoever. They checked my stomach. They checked all kinds of stuff. Oh yeah, I did another ultrasound, but this was like more like a baby. Are you having a baby in this whole entire area kind of ultrasound instead of just the doctor doing this or the ENT. So, yeah, nothing was found to have spread anywhere. So that was I guess a sigh of relief. Not a guess. That was a sigh of relief. But still was freaky to learn that you had for real, like, in a stage in a whatever cancer. And so, yeah, that's how I came to learn that I had cancer. That's how I came to identify through my ENT that it was just, yeah, it was a cancer that I don't know how many people out there are going through something similar to where they're just like, I don't know why I have this weird smell. I don't know why I have this weird taste in my mouth. I don't know why I have this little bump on my neck that goes away sometimes and sometimes stays, kind of thing. So, another crucial piece of evidence of the results that I left out was that mine returned as what they call HPV positive, human papilloma virus. No, papilloma sounds right. Papilloma virus. When that doctor there in Japan first gave me an option for my treatments, he gave me 3 options for treatments. The first one was that they were going to cut the cancer right out of my tongue. And he said that's not a good option, though, because quality of life is extremely low. Second one, he said, was going to be 2 months of being an inpatient and receiving chemo and radiation therapy. He said that was his best course of action for it. But he reiterated then, you should go back to your country. He said because that one's very intense and it has just over a 50% success rate, and that it would be extremely difficult for me to relay my feelings and how bad I was hurting to the staff there. And so, of course, we speak a little bit of Japanese. I think we can say, it's skoshi itai. A little. It hurts a little. Itai. It hurts. Sugoi itai. It incredibly hurts. It's incredibly hurting. There we go. It hurts a lot. There we go. Yeah. Mecha sugoi. I don't know. Anyway. His point was that he felt that there wasn't going to be enough to be able to relay what was going on to the nurses and for them to be able to help me. So not even we. Okay, I talked to my father, I talked to my brother, I talked to my stepfather. They were all in agreement that I needed to get back to my country. And so, and my brother, when I talked to him, he had this thing in his voice that, I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard that in his voice before, but it was super convincing. I needed to get my butt to Mars. So I asked him to help me get that all sorted out, and we eventually got back to my country. And what happened whenever we got here is we couldn't have anticipated the COVID breakout being as bad as what it got in between the time that we got our tickets to whenever we got here to when I first could actually start seeing a physical doctor. So, of course, when we got here, we had to do self-quarantine for 14 days. And so when I was able to actually finally see a doctor, I had to first go in for a round of blood testing and stuff because they wanted to see what was going on at that particular moment in time. And luckily, I had all my data and information that we got from all the tests and scans there in Japan. And I got to bring them into the ENT here, and he hand-walked them over to the cancer center here in this area. And what happened whenever I first talked to the ENT after he reviewed all of the documentation and stuff is I told him everything I just got done telling you, and he said, okay, well, so I'm going to paint you a much rosier picture because your particular stage, your particular type, your particular P16, which I'd find out is HPV positive, means that yours is your specific cancer is highly curable. And I didn't hear curable at the time. I guess my wife did, or maybe I said that to my wife. I can't remember. I just heard highly something. He said 85 to 90%, and since I'm not a drinker and I'm not a smoker, my percentage just goes up from there. And so, which was reiterated by the oncologist for the radiation and the oncologist for the medical or chemo. They both said pretty much the same thing.